Matthew Berrett is a Utah native from farther north up into Weber County, Weber High School, and he was appointed director of the Office of Iraq Analysis in January 2006 after serving as deputy director. He's worked with the CIA for over 21 years now, okay? And as director of this office, he's really on the hot seat, pretty much. And one of the good things and one of the problems is that one of his duties includes accompanying national intelligence and CIA directors into cabinet meetings in order to talk to individuals at the highest levels in our nation's government. Now, he has also served as Vice President Cheney's morning intelligence briefer. He served with the Department of State in Riyadh. And how did he come to all of this? I think you may want to ask him. He is not a BYU graduate, but he has a son here at BYU right now. He went to the University of Utah and graduated with a bachelor's degree in economics, has some background in the Far East and in banking and finance, and made his way to the CIA, was seduced by an offer to study the Middle East, which, as those of us who study it know, is really the most interesting area in the entire world. So he's going to talk today about the ins and outs of briefing high-level officials and how, as they say in the CIA, how one speaks truth to power.
Thank you, Dr. Bowen. I'm more than just a little uneasy getting up here, having been introduced as, among other things, a grad from the U. So I'm in blue, just for the record. Notice I'm wearing as much blue as I can, and I'm missing my. I came in with the folder. Oh, there it is.
It was not intentional sabotage.
I do have a son at the Y, and I was rooting for the Cougars in the Xavier game. Not sure what happened there, but I was rooting for the Y. We had some enjoyable time this morning in one of Dr. Bowen's capstone classes, and we talked about some of the things we'll hit today. I'm going to talk about some things we didn't hit in that this morning. I'm going to stay with the March Madness theme for just a minute more, but using it in a more serious and somewhat sobering way. Last year, I was watching the tourney, and I was watching the Blue Devils whoop up on some poor team. And I don't remember what the team was, but at one point during a break in the game, the camera crew cut over to the spectators, and they showed a Krzyzewski daughter. I don't know how many daughters he's got, at least one. And they cut over to her, and the commentary was that the young man sitting right next to her husband, was doing some R&R. He's a soldier, or was a soldier at the time in Iraq. And I, of course, was in this job at the time that I was having this moment. And there was something about that. Another long day in the office. I got home and did a quick dinner. Sat down, was watching this game, sort of trying to leave work behind a little bit, and it came back at me with this anecdote, this snapshot. And two things came to mind because of that. I quickly lost interest in the game, and two thoughts came to mind, neither of which I'd had for the first time. And the first one was the decisions made inside the Capitol Beltway out there in Washington by top decision makers, the president and others. They reach out and touch us. And the second thought that I had was that my analysts have been in the White House. I'm watching this game, and I'm being reminded of this war reaching out and touching American families. Reached out and touched the Krzyzewski family. It's touched mine. My analysts, over the course of this conflict and before, have been front and center with the President of the United States 4 times, 5 times, 6 times a week, every week, trying to inform him on this dynamic, this incredibly complex dynamic. And part of the moment I was having was the sense of responsibility. And the question that was lingering in my mind was, have we served Americans well? One of the things I did this morning was with capstone students was I read off some of the names of some of the young Americans who have lost their lives in Iraq just in February. 78 Americans died in Iraq in February, and I read just a few of the names on this listing I have from the region. Some from Colorado, some from New Mexico. The last person on the list, Specialist Eric R. Seeger, 18, Layton, Utah. So one of the reasons that I suggested, offered to Dr. Bowen to come and speak today on the intelligence policy dynamic is it's a relationship that's going on out there that a lot of Americans don't have a whole lot of insight into, and I think Americans deserve to have some insight into that because the things analysts think and the actions policymakers take affect us. I'm going to use I've got a story that will help me illustrate some key parts of this relationship, this dynamic. And bear with me. I'm going to read just a few lines out of a great little book that has some history in it that you won't find anywhere else. This book is entitled CIA Briefings of Presidential Candidates. Some of you might not know this, but as soon as the national parties make their picks in the national election, the CIA offers to brief them. So before it was President Carter, when it was nominee Carter, we went out and briefed President Carter on some of the key issues, key foreign policy, national security issues. The author of this is John Helgerson, and John Helgerson has had most of the senior positions in the agency over the last 10 years. He was the Deputy Director of Intelligence, and that is the most senior person over the analytic part of the agency, and we all hail from the analytic part of the agency. He's currently the Consul General at the agency. But he took a year off to go out and do a lot of research, talk to a fair number of former presidents to get their eyewitness accountings of some of the events in this in the stories that he covers. So I'm going to draw a little bit from some of his research. And again, this is involves a meeting. The date of the meeting was 24 November 1963. Does that date jump out at any of you for any particular reason? 24th of November, 63. What's that?
I was at the Cuban Missile Crisis. I don't know.
No. Sir? 2 days, right? 2 days after Kennedy is assassinated, Vice President Johnson finds himself in the president's chair. So understandably, he wants to quickly bone up on a whole lot of world issues that he followed at some level before, but it's different now. He's in charge. He's chairing this meeting. He had gathered a small handful of his top foreign policy and intelligence advisors, one of whom was John McCone. John McCone was the Director of Central Intelligence at that point. What do you think they might have been talking about? These are foreign policy advisors. 2 days after the president's killed, keep your mind in this sort of international relations part of the president's portfolio, not domestic affairs. What do you think they might have been talking about in 1963?
The Russians killed Kennedy.
Vietnam. This particular meeting focused on Vietnam. Okay, so bear with me. I'm going to read just a little bit. We'll stop and we'll try to keep this as interactive as I can. We'll chat a bit, and then I'm going to read a little bit more, and we'll chat some more. Okay. According to McCone, again, McCone is the Director of Central Intelligence. According to McCone, U.S. Ambassador to South Vietnam, Henry Cabot Lodge, informed the group that the United States had not been involved in the recent coup against South Vietnamese President Diem. In fact, Lodge had instructed a CIA liaison officer to tell the South Vietnamese generals that the U.S. government had lost confidence in President Diem, and he was kept aware of events before and during the coup on 1 November. During the course of the military takeover, Diem was captured and then killed. Lodge maintained that the population of South Vietnam was very happy as a result of the coup, showing the group assembled at the Executive Office building some pictures of crowds in Saigon. Lodge argued that the change in government in South Vietnam had been an improvement and that he was hopeful about the course of the war, expecting, quote, market progress, end quote, by February or March 1964. He also stated, without elaboration, that there were indications that North Vietnam might be interested in reaching mutually satisfactory arrangements with the United States. McCone wrote in his memorandum for the record that Lodge's statements were, quote, optimistic, hopeful, and left the president with the impression that we were on the road to victory, end quote. McCone presented the group with a much more pessimistic CIA assessment. He cited the continuing increase in Viet Cong activity over the previous month, predicting more and sustained pressures from the guerrillas. The director pointed out that the South Vietnamese military was having considerable trouble organizing the government and was receiving little help from the civilian leaders, who seemed to be staying on the sidelines. McCone said the intelligence community could not give an optimistic